Hi there.
Here. Schneider.
Here.
And it's my understanding that Sumrow is not feeling well, so she will not be in attendance this evening.
Correct. As I was reviewing the documents for this evening, I found that policies 830, Rule 1 and Rule 2 haven't been updated since our March 2nd meeting. So I would recommend that we postpone A, B, and C and move forward with D through K. So is there a motion to approve the agenda with the suggestion just stated?
I move that we approve the agenda with the modifications just suggested.
All right, and I will provide a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to 1D, approval of the March 2nd minutes. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of March 2nd.
All right, I will provide a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously. So that will bring us to 2D, Policy 163, Board Member Development Opportunities. Board Member Schneider, I yield the floor. Would you like to get us started?
I have no notes on this policy.
Okay. My only concern is that first paragraph, that last sentence. Informed decision-making grows more important as school governance becomes increasingly complex. While I agree with that, but I want everyone to practice informed decision-making for simple and complex decisions. Is anyone opposed to us omitting that last sentence?
No, not opposed.
Okay, and then the next portion that begins in keeping with this position, I think we could just omit that and begin that with the board encourages the participation of its members. And those are the only adjustments. So do those seem reasonable to you, Board Member Schneider?
Those are reasonable.
All right. Thank you so much. And let's just go to the rule, and then we can approve them together. Looking at,
Excuse me.
yes.
I just want to clarify exactly what we're deleting. So we're deleting the last sentence in the first paragraph.
Yep.
And then I didn't catch what we were deleting in the second paragraph. Is
Yep,
it
the
first
opening
sentence?
clause, no, just the opening clause. So in keeping with this
Oh,
position,
okay.
so if we began that paragraph with the board encourages.
Got it. Thank
Yep.
you.
No, absolutely. Stop me anytime you have a question.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right. As we move to policy 163, Rule 1, Board Member Schneider, do you have any concerns or edits to recommend?
I have no edits at this time.
Okay. All right. So so in-state meetings, seminar, conventions, and workshops, that second header, I would propose that we remove that because it talks about, let me find it. For both national and in-state attendance. So it covers both, but the header is specifically for in-state meetings. And actually, let me back up. So I'm proposing that we remove that header, and then that first sentence, I just want to double check that we want to keep that. Any member may attend in-state meetings, seminars, conventions, and workshops. That kind of negates the approval process. I mean, I'm sure that's the spirit of it, but right above that, with number 4, if attendance is approved. So those could be in conflict with each other unless there's something that I'm missing. Attorney Love?
Or if I could jump in, I can give
Please.
you some better information. So the last sentence that you referred to that you felt was talking about both, it is, because it's as though it would have another header, but it didn't need a header, because it's just letting you know that board members are eligible for any reimbursement per district policy, whether they do in-state or national travel and workshop and stuff. So
So-
that doesn't fall under that second header. It's just saying, hey, so we could even move it to the top if that would make it clearer for you.
So here's my question. I'm wondering again if we need that second header, because there's not a different process, if I'm understanding it correctly, whether you're attending something in-state or a national convention,
No, there
right?
is a different process.
Okay.
So the national conferences, seminars, conventions, or workshops, anything national outside of the state of Wisconsin has to go to the board and be board approved. Anything that's within the state of Wisconsin other than the January convention, if you saw a workshop that you wanted to go to in Janesville or in Madison, you can just work with the superintendent and I to make that happen. It would, you would want to let your board president know that you're interested in going to that, but you don't have to have that board approved because there's a budget for the board members to do that kind of travel, and it doesn't have to be put on a board meeting, and you don't have to be given permission by the board to attend. That's what that second heading and that one little paragraph is trying to say. You can just work with the board secretary or even Miss Dooley to make that happen. Whereas the first 4 steps are trying to tell you that it has to go through the board, and then you work with either me or Miss Dooley to make it happen.
Okay, so that is good to know because that hasn't been our recent practice. I know that if there's like a conference that WASB is doing or a seminar, et cetera, we've all discussed that at the board and then voted to approve, like all board members doing it. So it's good to note that difference. Since that is the case, I would recommend that we put that last sentence that pertains to national and in-state under the national conference, since it's in line with that process.
Okay, but it's also true for in-state. So it might fit better at the beginning because you're eligible to
Yeah.
be reimbursed for both.
So at the beginning, you're saying under national conferences, seminars,
No,
conventions, and
above that.
workshops?
Even above that.
That would be perfect. Do you have any issues with that, Board Member Schneider?
I have no issues with that.
All right, so if we move that last sentence to above the first header,
Okay.
and then keep the second header. And then my other comment was the last, so the new last sentence, once we move the current one to the top, work with the board secretary for registration and any travel. That seems redundant because we already have that in number 4.
But that's for national. The sentence that you're talking about is for in-state.
But it's the same for both processes, correct? Okay, so maybe we should include that at the top above the first header, and then have the information under the header be specific to that header.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So we'll
does.
take those last 2 sentences and put those above the first header,
Okay.
and then everything else will flow and be attached to, it'll be aligned to its header. Board Member Schneider, is that okay with you?
That is a good idea.
Okay. Do you need any assistance with wording or how we want that to flow at the beginning, Ms. Shope?
I'll give it a try, and then I can just shoot it over to you, and you can make any tweaks or whatever before the next meeting.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Actually, if we do it now, we can just go ahead and get it approved.
Okay.
So what if we say board members shall... Okay, board members interested in attending either in-state or national conferences, seminars, conventions, or workshops shall work with the board secretary or their designee for registration and any travel arrangements that may be necessary, period. And then we have that last sentence, board members shall be reimbursed.
Okay, so just repeat the first part of it. The board members interested in attending national or in-state conferences, seminars, conventions, or workshops shall,
Work with the board secretary
Okay.
or their designee for registration
okay,
and any travel arrangements
Okay.
that may be necessary.
okay,
And then we have that last sentence right after that.
okay,
And all of that is going to be before the first header.
okay,
All right.
yep.
All right. Board Member Schneider, anything else for that Rule 1?
No.
All right. So is there a motion to approve policy 163 and 163 Rule 1 as amended?
So moved.
Okay, and that's to move that onto the full board. I will provide a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. So that brings us to policy 166. Board
I'm
member.
sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
I told you I'm rusty. So, did you vote on both policies or just the rule?
The policy and the rule for
Okay.
163. So 163 and 163 Rule 1.
Okay,
Yep.
yep, okay,
And then we'll do the same thing for 166, and we'll just
Okay.
kind of handle them like that. All
got
right.
it. Yep.
Board Member Schneider, any questions, concerns, or adjustments for policy 166? Board member requests for information.
I have no concerns with this one.
Okay. My only issue, which may not be an issue, is the last portion of the last sentence in that first paragraph. According to approved procedures, I'm assuming that, and maybe I'm overthinking this, those are the procedures outlined in policy 166, Rule 1. So, Ms. Shope, what has been the standard? Because we wouldn't, it's not cross-listed, but if we could just change that to according to approved procedures listed in policy 166, Rule 1, I think that clears up the vagueness. Does that sound okay with you, Board Member Schneider?
That sounds fine.
Okay. Yep, so if we can just add on to the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says, according to approved procedures found in policy 166, Rule 1.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. All right, that brings us to Rule 1 of Policy 166. We'll take it a page at a time. Board Member Schneider, anything for that first page?
I know there's a comment at the top that suggests that this may be moved to the administrative procedures instead of as part of Policy 166.
And actually, I am for keeping it in policy, one, because that has been our practice as we're reviewing, and two, board members should kind of be able to find all of their instruction in policy and not have to go to administrative procedures, since we're not a part, you know what I mean, a part of the
Right.
administration team in that sense. So for those two reasons, for me, it would make sense to keep that as Rule 1 of the policy.
I agree.
Okay.
It was just the statement was there, I wanted to address it.
No, I appreciate that. Any other concerns for page 1?
I have no concerns.
All right, and then I'm going to kind of mix and match with page 1 and page 2, if that's okay.
That's fine.
All right, and here's my thinking. My thinking is, I like the way the process is outlined. I'm fine with the additions and the recommended deletions, but in my mind, it makes sense to go through, like if a request is submitted and everything goes well and it's fulfilled, then have that in order. And then talk about if a request is submitted and there's a hiccup, and then if a request is submitted and then it's withdrawn. So with that context, I would propose us keeping 1 through 3, and then actually 7 would become number 4. Because 1 through 3 talks about, okay, the request comes in, this is how the superintendent handles it. And then number 7, once the request has been compiled, it's kind of that reporting out process. And actually 8 is I think should have been included with 7. So I would say 7 and 8 should just be 4. But, okay, that makes sense. And then the old number 4, 5, and 6 would now become 5, 6, and 7. So let me repeat that. So keep 1 through 3. And then 7 and 8 would become 4, and then 4, 5, and 6 would become 5, 6, and 7, because that gives, like, best case scenario, it's submitted, it's fine, it's submitted, and we need to dig in, and then it's submitted and then withdrawn. Does anyone have an issue or problem with that formatting?
No.
Okay. Sometimes in this document, like the superintendent is lowercase. So if we could, in the first time I saw it was in number 3, and then the new number 5. So if, Ms. Shope, if you could just scan through there and make sure that we're capitalizing superintendent. And then in the new number 5 that starts the staff member compiling the information, if we go down a little bit, so go down to that second line, it says if the information is not readily available or requires a significant amount of time to prepare, just comma and then lowercase, the superintendent will then. So if we could just change that the to a lowercase the and then capitalize superintendent. The capitalization again in 6. And then do I need to slow down, Ms. Shope?
No, but
Okay, yep.
typically you don't capitalize superintendent unless you're saying superintendent of schools or the school district of Beloit superintendent. When you're just saying the superintendent, it's not capitalized.
Okay, because in other policies, we've capitalized it throughout.
And I've been trying to correct those as I find them, but
Okay.
with a bazillion policies, it's
Right.
hard to do.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I just want us to be consistent. Could you
Yep.
use the search? Okay. How cumbersome would it be, like when we change the gender pronouns, to use the search function and then determine if it needs to be capitalized or not?
I've been looking for that as I'm doing the gender change.
Okay, but can you input that in the search so they'll all come up? Or is that a ridiculous
Yes,
request?
I can do a find and replace.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, just so that we're consistent. And then in the new number 6 that starts if the superintendent determines, that last sentence, actually just go up a little bit more. Okay, upon consultation with the board president to be most appropriate for action at the next meeting, comma, whether the request should be, or at the next meeting, period, and then delete whether, and then the request would start a new sentence with a capital T there. And I would say the request will be granted or denied. So it will be some action there instead of should. Now my question, so let's say that a board member submits a request that the superintendent wants someone else to look at it because it's going to cost a significant amount of money, or it's going to require a significant amount of time to compile it. Now, the way this is written, the superintendent could either direct it to a committee or directly to the full board. And I'm leaning towards send that to the full committee. And the reason is, let's say someone put in a request, the superintendent, it gave him pause, and so he sent it to policy. So then we reviewed it, but we're 3 of 7. We can't make that decision for the board, so it's gonna have to go to the full board anyway. So in an interest of streamlining things and not having us have to review the same request twice, I would be for, if the superintendent would like the board to decide whether or not the request is approved, that go directly to the full board. Board Member Schneider, do you have a different feeling on that?
No, I mean, that would be fine.
Okay. So if we could just change the language in number 6, the request will, and again, the superintendent can make the decision, so it's only if the superintendent would like it to be approved by the board because of the reasons that are listed. The request will then be forwarded to the full Board of Education for action at the next meeting. So what would be deleted is or standing committee, whichever is determined by the superintendent upon consultation with the board president to be most appropriate. Did you get all that, Ms. Shope? Perfect. All right, and then, yeah.
Ms. Love has her hand up.
Oh, yes, thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry. I put my hand up earlier because Lauren was having difficulty getting into the call.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure that everyone knew Lauren is on the call. This is my last board meeting. I'm retiring. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And to tell you that I've enjoyed working with you on the policies that we've done so far.
So Attorney Love, I had heard that and I shifted into denial because I enjoy working with you so much, but you just pulled me out of with your statement. So congratulations.
Rob Buckham has been denying it for a long time too. So.
That makes sense.
Well, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure. You have probably spoiled us, but we will welcome the new attorney with open arms.
And if I may also say,
Please.
Congratulations on your retirement, and I have invited Lauren to this meeting and all future policy meetings. Not that I want you to go away. I'd love to keep you.
And please remind me of Lauren's last name.
Baran.
Say it one more time,
Lauren,
please.
go ahead. You can speak for yourself.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm by phone tonight. So my last name is Burand, B-U-R-A-N-D.
All right, Attorney Burand, we are excited to have you join us this evening and for all of our future meetings. So thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Board Member Schneider, anything on page 2?
No.
Okay. The only thing that I just wanted to see what the response is. Number 3, the relevance of the request to school district business. It seems to me like that's covered in number 1. So the need for knowledge to make a committee or board decision versus like to know. Unless there's something I'm missing, is everyone okay with omitting 3 because it's covered in number 1?
I am fine with that.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion to approve policy 166 and,
I'm sorry, before you go there.
Yes.
I'm confused on, so I understand number 3 is what you want to delete, but I'm confused as to where you think that's covered.
okay, so number 3 says the relevance of the request to school district business. And what I take that to mean is it might not be relevant. And it might just be something I'd like to know. And number 1 says the need for knowledge to make a committee or board decision versus like to know.
Oh,
Are you reading that differently?
I was still on the first set of
Oh,
numbers.
no
I wasn't
problem.
on the
Yeah,
second
page
set of numbers.
2.
I apologize.
No problem.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
I'm with you now.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for stopping me. Okay, so we're gonna omit number 3, and we'll have 1, 2, and then 4 will become number 3. All right. Is there a motion to approve policy 166 and policy 166 rule 1 to the full board for review?
So moved.
All right, I will provide a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously, and that brings us to policy 174. Board Member Schneider, anything with that first and only page of policy 174?
No.
All right, I have a question. So the annual organizational meeting of the board, of the Beloit Board of Education shall be held on or within 30 days after the fourth Monday in April. That seems like a long time. Is there a reason that doesn't say on or within 30 days of the election? Yes. Okay, I'm listening.
It's state statute.
They give you that long? Like you can go 30 days after people are seated without having an organizational meeting?
Yes.
All right.
I know it seems strange, but you can.
Okay. We won't, but
Right.
it's
Right.
all right.
Bigger districts don't, but a smaller district might.
Okay. And then we also just need to add the office of parliamentarian.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
No, because the parliamentarian isn't elected, they're appointed. Parliamentarian isn't an officer, they're not elected, they're appointed.
We created it as an office.
To be elected? Mm-hmm. Oh, my misunderstanding
No,
then.
no, we are in this together, Ms. Shope. No worries.
See, we did that before I went out.
Yeah.
And now I'm back and, my memory's gone.
That's okay.
So I will totally fix that, and that means I have to totally fix the declaration of interest that's going to go out on
Oh,
Friday.
see, that's why we're doing this. And a fun fact, I knew that went out very soon after the election, but I
Right.
didn't know it was the first Friday. I'm like, oh, that has to go out on Friday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. However, this policy change isn't really affecting it. It's the other policy that's affecting it.
Yep.
Okay, so I got to add parliamentarian. I
Please,
will do
ma'am. All right, and then just a question. The last sentence, upon election of all officers, the board will convene into regular session. Attorney Love, what does that mean? Because I thought we were in regular session when we were having the organizational meeting.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. You're starting the meeting with the superintendent conducting the meeting.
Yep.
And so it's intended to specify that once the election has taken place, then you're moving into a regular meeting where the superintendent's no longer conducting the meeting.
So let me ask you this. Our practice has been that we vote on our president first, and then once the president is elected, then the superintendent no longer presides over the meeting. The president does. So, but this says upon election of all officers. Are we turning it over prematurely?
No, and then what is your process? Then you go into your regular meeting?
So, okay, so help me understand what regular meeting means. Because when we start the organizational meeting, the superintendent's presiding, but that's not considered regular session?
No.
No.
So regular session commences when? When the president is elected and then the president takes over the running of the meeting?
Maybe I can clarify.
I'm listening.
So past practice was we would have our organizational meeting on the fourth Tuesday directly before our regular or board business meeting.
Okay.
So we would, those were always scheduled for 7 o'clock. But when we had the organizational meeting on the fourth Tuesday in April, which would be the first opportunity for the new board members to be seated and participate in a regular board meeting, we did the organizational meeting at 7 o'clock. And then we would have the notice of meeting for the regular board meeting, say, at 7:15 or 7:20, whichever time the board president picked. And we would say, or immediately following the organizational meeting, whichever is later, so that they could then convene into regular session, because they would go into that regular business board meeting following the organizational meeting. And then everybody who had been elected in those officer positions were now in those officer positions in that board business meeting. Prior to that, if the president of the board was not somebody up for reelection, and they were still, so let's just say you weren't up for election, you were the board president, you would run any special board meetings or any meetings that would take place on that Monday or Tuesday leading up to the organizational meeting. You would still conduct those meetings as board president, because we haven't held our organizational meeting.
Correct, but Dr. Keiser would start the organizational meeting. So would it make
Correct.
more sense to say, upon completion of the organizational meeting, the board will convene into regular session?
If scheduled.
Exactly. Because the way we're doing it now, with the first and the third being our regular meetings, we don't have any other meeting other than the organizational meeting scheduled for the fourth Tuesday now.
So can we just omit that last sentence?
I don't know, is that legal, Susan? I don't know if that's part of statute or not. I could look it up quick.
No, I think it would be better to include the language, but make the modification that was just mentioned, that upon conclusion of the
Organizational meeting, yep. The board will
you
convene.
into a regular session if scheduled. Or you could say, we'll convene into will, let me think.
Can we say convene into regular session as needed?
I'm just thinking, instead of, you could say as needed or when scheduled, or the next scheduled, upon completion of the organizational meeting, the board will convene into regular session, I think when scheduled.
Or okay, let me ask you this, Attorney Love. Can we just leave it, we'll convene into regular session, period? Because we don't necessarily have to have a meeting right after. Like after that, our next meeting is going to be regular session.
Well, I think I would read that to mean, if we leave it as it's currently drafted, I would read that to mean that you're going to be going into a regular meeting immediately following.
Okay.
Even though it doesn't say that. So if you said into regular session as scheduled.
Perfect. All right, Board Member Schneider, thank you, Attorney Love. Anything else for policy 174?
No.
All right. Let's look at policy 174, Rule 1. Anything on that page, that first page?
I did not have anything marked at this time. I'm just wondering if there were any changes now as we,
Yeah, and then
those
I
changes.
think I captured a couple of them, but you please scan while I'm talking to see if
Okay.
there's anything I missed. Okay, so at the end of A, if we could change orientation meeting to organizational meeting, unless, I heard mention of board, like an onboarding, and that is separate from the organizational meeting. So is that our standard nomenclature now, onboarding? Okay, so if we could say prior to the onboarding meeting, just to make sure we're consistent. And then I have a question. I didn't realize this, so that's one of the things that I love about reading policy. In B, that fourth line, so if you are interested in running for office, okay, so each candidate will have 3 minutes to present. We do that, but I like having that. You've got 3 minutes, prepare your speech, and we're moving on. But the last sentence, well, let me back up. To present information, and then it says this information may be written or verbal at the choice of the presenter. So Attorney Love, my question for you, let's say someone wants to run for office, but they don't want to do a verbal speech. They just want to have their information printed out. Do they need to do that prior to the meeting so we can get that posted so the public can see it and so they see what we're seeing? Or how does that need to be handled if someone chooses not to give a verbal presentation? They want to submit something in writing.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but my thinking would be that if there's information that they want shared, that it has to be made available either at the meeting or in advance. And if you're going to review it, and it's written material, I would think it would need to be submitted in advance.
So here's my issue, because I want to make sure we're not violating any open meetings records or disclosure information. So, it said in a previous policy that any material that the board is using in order to make a decision needs to be like made available to the public, et cetera. And we do that with our posting and our attachments. So my specific question, which I think you answered, but does this need to be posted like when our meeting? So if I wanted to run for office and I wanted to give a written presentation, that was my submission, would I need to submit that to have it included as an attachment for the meeting and like publicly noticed and here are all the attachments? Or is that something that someone could just pass out at the meeting and that would be considered open?
If your policy regarding, submissions, and I'd have to look at the policy that relates to that, if it says that it has to be posted, then anything in writing would have to be consistent with that.
Okay.
So am I making sense there? If you have a policy that says written documents have to be made available in advance so they can be distributed, then any written materials that are being submitted here would have to be consistent with that. If you don't have a policy that requires the submission of this written state that would arguably apply, then I would say it wouldn't have to be. But I would want to look at any other policy that might impact this before you vote on it.
Right. Is there a reason we put written or verbal, Ms. Shope? Has anyone done that? or I don't want to exclude anyone if that's how they want to convey information.
I have never in the past had anybody submit anything in writing. Now, to cause a little more confusion, in years gone by, when the board was meeting on the second and fourth Tuesdays, what was typically done was on the third Tuesday, they would hold a special board meeting to review the results of the declaration of interest, and that's where this step would take place. So when those declaration of interest results that are compiled were reviewed by all of the board members, the incoming and the remaining, the ones that were not up for election, that was the opportunity then to say, well, this is why I really want to be the president, or this is why I really want to be the labor liaison, or this is why I really want to be the legislative liaison, things like that. As far as I can remember, it wasn't ever really a huge debate. And some people would just say, I think I'd make a good treasurer because I have a math background and that's part of my job. I'm an accountant at such and such a firm. And other people would be like, okay, then you can be the treasurer because I just put it down, And so then we would change numbers, I would on my master sheet, and then I would redo it and send it back out to the board so that you would have a clean copy of how people really wanted to be nominated or elected on the night of the organizational meeting. That was kind of how it was handled back in the day.
Got it.
But it really hasn't been done that way the last few years. There hasn't been necessarily that meeting, that in-between meeting to review and debate and talk about it.
So Attorney Love, let me ask you this. Would we be running into any issues if we omitted that sentence? So this information may be written or verbal at the choice of the presenter. If we just did verbal presentations, is that problematic?
No.
Okay. So how about this? If you go to that fourth line, each candidate will have 3 minutes to present, period. And then my other question, debate and discussion is desired at this point. So that last sentence, I can't, if Greg tells me he wants to be treasurer, I can't imagine debating Greg. Like I can imagine asking Greg a question. Do we really want that to say debate? And my other question is how long? Like, does that go 3 minutes? Does that, I don't want to overthink everything, but I think that could, if we had some structure in that may be helpful. So one, do we really want to say debate? Is discussion sufficient? And if so, is it prudent to put a time limit on that the same way we did for how much time each candidate will have to present their information? What do you think, Board Member Schneider?
Yeah, I agree with taking the word debate off, but I hate to put too small of a time limit on that, because if, for example, 3 people want to be, vice president, then there needs to be enough discussion to be able to make a decision as to who might be the best person in that position or who you want to go for.
Okay. I'm fine with trusting that we'll be reasonable.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so just to recap, because we made a few changes to B, we will say each candidate will have 3 minutes to present, period, and then discussion is desired at this point. And we'll leave it at that. We won't put a time restriction on it. And then my other recommendation is that for the header intentions, if we remove the S and just make it intention, I like that that's spelled out. But what I would say is this would allow the inclusion of new board members into this process and eliminate the potential for an illegal walking quorum. I think those two statements can be nicely combined, and we just drop the S on intentions. Board Member Schneider, you
I
have any
agree.
okay.
I agree.
Perfect. All right. So since we are omitting the written and verbal choice of the presenter, we don't need to follow up on that one. So is there a motion to approve policy 174 and policy 174 Rule 1 as amended to move on to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
All right. Second, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. All right, that brings us to our final two policies for the night. We'll begin with policy 183, voting method. Board Member Schneider, any adjustments to this policy?
No.
Okay, I didn't have any either. As we look at policy 183, Rule 1, any questions or adjustments?
No.
I didn't have any either. All right. Is there well, let me ask this. No, I just answered my own question because there are edits in policy 183. So 183 Rule 1, since it's not changing, won't need to move on to the full board. Secretary Shope, if you could just note the revision date, and then we'll keep that. But is there a motion to approve policy 183 to the full board for first reading?
So moved.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, so again, policy 830, we'll review that at our May meeting. Policies 377, the administration had asked for some additional time to work on that, so that will be on our agenda for our May meeting as well. Our next meeting date will be Wednesday, May 4th at 5:30, same place. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Attorney Love, again, congratulations on your retirement. It has been a joy to work with you. You make the complicated simple, and I appreciate that. Attorney Brand, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Brand, yep, you're fine.
Brand, thank you. We look forward to continuing to work with you. All right, stay well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I had 7% left. So we got to just